Welcome to Diversity, a production of the Anti-Bias Task Force. I'm Kevin Chabla.
And I'm Anna Skrenta.
On this program, we'll be speaking with our East Hampton neighbors and fellow community members, bringing us their different views of East Hampton. We'll discuss topics that unify our community and programs which serve to educate us about our neighbors. Today, we are very happy to be talking to two very special guests, Rev Leandra Lambert, curate at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in East Hampton, and Rabbi Josh Franklin of the Jewish Center of the Hamptons. Thank you both for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Mine too.
Reverend Lambert, can you please tell us a bit about your journey to the priesthood and how it brought you to East Hampton?
Sure. I grew up in Brooklyn and come from a very big family, a very small immediate family, but a large family. And so religion was a part of our formation as children. I have two older brothers. And during my teenage years, I kind of got away from the church and was just enjoying being a teenager and being in my 20s. I had an experience when I was in college. I studied abroad in Greece, and it was shortly after the economic downturn there, and found myself in the middle of some very dangerous situations with the demonstrations that were going on there. And so in the midst of, tear gas and seeing people just badly hurt, was wondering, well, where is God in this? And it's a question that I brought back with me, and it just sort of stayed with me throughout my 20s. And after college, just wasn't sure what I was going to do. And a friend of mine who was Muslim, we were graduating from college together. She encouraged me to apply to divinity school. And I said to her, that's not really my thing. But she was very persistent and said, I really think that you should do this. And so I went to graduate school to study life at the intersection of faith and politics. And it was while in divinity school that I felt the call to ministry, which took me back to my Episcopal roots, and went through the formal discernment process and have been ordained for a little over 2 years now. And your first assignment as an ordained priest, your bishop tells you where you're going to go. And so I was sent to the far east of our diocese, which is the Diocese of Long Island, and it's comprised of Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk. So I guess the furthest away from Brooklyn I could get was the east end of Long Island. And so I've been at St. Luke's since August of 2018.
Wow. I read a quote of yours, and I'm sorry I didn't write it down, but it really struck me. You were speaking about how there's life at very opposite ends of the spectrum out here, and the attention gets paid a lot to kind of the glamorous Hamptons, the wealthy Hamptons, but that there's very much another community here, or a different part of the community here that gets less recognition and attention. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your experience ministering to many different types of people in the community, and how you've found that while you're here.
So my own assumptions about the East End was that it was indeed a very glamorous place, and it is. But there's, a community of people. There are so many people who comprise the East Hampton community and make it what it is. So you have those who are here for the summer season, and then you have that really thriving year-round community. And so I've really gotten to experience the richness of the diversity within the East Hampton community. And, it's really informed my ministry. My ministry has taken me, to the train station, where there are people who sometimes sleep there because they have nowhere else to go, and also to the country club here. So I've gotten to see all different aspects of our community, and each aspect brings a dimension that makes East Hampton an exciting and challenging, and keeps me continually curious and asking that question, who is my neighbor, and what does it mean to be neighbor and to be in community with people?
Well, thank you. Rabbi Franklin, I understand that your father was also a rabbi. Did you always know you wanted to follow in his footsteps? Can you share a bit about your spiritual journey and how it brought you to East Hampton?
Sure. When your father is a rabbi or one of your parents is clergy, and imagine this is going to be the case with my children as well, people always asked me, am I going to be a rabbi like my father? And growing up, I always knew what the answer was going to be. The answer was absolutely not. This is my father's path. This isn't my path. Having said that, I always had a strong connection to Judaism and Jewish life. And I think the question really started to take on a new significance when I got to college. And I started on a whim really taking Jewish studies classes because, like many undergraduates, I was unsure what I really wanted to do with myself. And so I took a Jewish studies class and I took another one and started studying Hebrew and studied abroad in Israel. And eventually that question, which just kept on being asked, was, are you going to be a rabbi? The answer suddenly shifted from absolutely no to something along the lines of, well, maybe I'm thinking about it. And eventually it transformed into a calling. It was a process. It wasn't an epiphany. I want to be a rabbi. It was really the question that I was asked my entire life. And really, after years and years, finally came around to realizing that it was my calling when I was in college.
And how did you end up in East Hampton?
So the process of finding a congregation for a rabbi is a little bit different than the Episcopal Church. But my first rabbinate, my first position was in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where I was a rabbi in a large community, about 1,200 families. I was one of 4 rabbis, and I was an assistant rabbi, then an associate rabbi there. But eventually I realized that I wanted my own community, my own congregation, and I wanted a place that was a little smaller and more intimate. And so I started looking around for where there were open places. And I wound up here in East Hampton, a place that was intriguing to me at first. And then I really grew to love. And I found it my home for the last 4 years.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I have a question that's kind of for both of you. It's the same question. If you could both talk about your work with Anti-Bias Task Force and what led you to specifically want to be a part of this work. And if we could start with Rev Lambert, that'd be great.
So shortly after I arrived in East Hampton, I met Sylvia Overby, and she was telling me about the task force and invited me to consider joining. And I thought it would be a good way to get to know members of the community. And I'm glad that I did. You know, what I love about it is that it's comprised of different people within the community. And so I feel like there are certain members who kind of have their pulse on the beat of life out here. And so we're always bringing to the fore concerns of the community.
So you felt it was the best way to also get a feel for what the concerns of the community were and how through being a reverend you could address those concerns. Is that what I'm getting?
Yes, some concerns I hear through the course of my ministry out here, and other aspects of it I'm not as familiar with. So housing concerns, I'll hear about it, and then other things such as the Springs community, my ministry doesn't directly take me there, so I'm not as familiar. And so members of the task force who live in Springs would just bring any particular concern.
Okay, thank you. And Rabbi Franklin, if you could also speak to this.
Well, I just want to clear something up. I'm actually not a member of the Anti-Bias Task Force, though I know they do great work and appreciate all that they're doing. But if there's a question on a particular issue related to it, I'm happy to answer.
Apologies about that. I kind of suspected that, but I didn't realize that you weren't an official member. Apologies for that. I guess we could, the Anti-Bias Task Force really carries on from, what we touched on earlier about really the uniqueness of this community. And I wonder about, in terms of both of your ministries, how you find, I feel like we are somewhat almost tribal out here. Our country is right now, but there is definitely, and I'm wondering if you hear, if you have found that through your work, if you find it's a challenge to kind of reach outside of certain circles. You kind of touched on this, Reverend, with the Springs community. And do you feel like there's clericus kind of reaching all the parts of our community, or is there room for kind of expansion there? Whoever would like to take it first.
I guess I'll say one statistic that I learned recently is that East Hampton has some of the most impoverished population in all of Suffolk County, which is a surprising thing to learn, especially as Reverend Lambert was saying. The popular perception is quite the opposite, that we are the most wealthy community. And that causes, I think, there to be a neglect for the impoverished in our community. And many people, the weekenders, the people who summer here, other than them finding workers to do work for them, have no idea that this kind of poverty exists. So our community in particular is always trying to figure out ways to bridge that gap. Two organizations that we're working with very recently, one is the Retreat, which serves families who are victims of abuse, and we're sponsoring several families in order to get them holiday gifts at this time of year. And another important staple in our community out here are the food pantries, which we're working with as well. And if you want to take a look at the kind of the fact that there is a gap in income out here, just to go to the line and look at the food pantries and see how long that line actually is, and you would be amazed. I mean, the line was blocks long in March and April at the time of the lockdown, and it's still pretty significant, and they need our support. And so we're working to support the food pantries as well, because they're integral to making sure that parts of the community that too often get overlooked are really able to be sustained out here.
I want to echo and underscore everything that Rabbi Franklin has just said. And St. Luke's has really partnered with both the Retreat and our food pantries here in East Hampton and in the Springs community. And we are hearing of the great need. And, when we talk about what it means to be community, what it means to be neighbor, this is really what it's about. And what I love about Rabbi Franklin's ministry and my ministry is that it comes really from an understanding of our sacred texts, right? For it compels us to be part of creative problem solving and thinking through, but we're doing that from a place of our faith.
Thank you.
Just a quick note that right before the lockdown started, Reverend Leandra and I were meeting pretty regularly to study texts together.
Yeah.
And our community out here in East Hampton, I will say that one of the real amazing things that we're able to do is have interfaith programming and dialogue with each other. Our different faith communities are more integrated than most other communities around the country. It's special. An example of that is the community dinners, the community soup dinners that we were doing, where we would meet at Most Holy Trinity, and people from all faith communities came around and sat together at the table and got to know each other. That's a pretty unique kind of program that goes on.
Yeah.
I also teach a class every summer, and taught a class this summer as well on Zoom with the very Reverend Dennis Brunel, who works with Reverend Leandra. And we've been doing that for 2 years. So we are not just in conversation, we're in partnership, we're in community, and we do get out of our silos. And that is not to be taken for granted. It's something that I think really is special about our community out here on the East End.
I'm really glad you highlighted that. And I'm personally friends with many people who are involved in the food pantries, in the soup dinner. And I think it's really something we can be very proud of in our community, how many community members want to care for every one of their neighbors. It's really special. So thanks for highlighting that.
Yeah. If I could also just speak to that, I remember how my history teacher always talks about how within East Hampton we live in kind of a bubble. And he usually talks that with in terms of politics and like economic factors within East Hampton. But I think that's also shared with, like I said, a rabbi, with the sense that the religious
Kevin, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It's very hard to hear you, Kevin. I think
in other parts of the country and of the world, it's not so much the case. I feel like that's something that's really should be celebrated.
Kevin, I'm sorry. It was very hard to hear you. You were breaking up quite a bit.
Oh, I finished talking.
Maybe you could maybe you could share your thoughts in the chat, and I can read. Okay, Kevin, I'm sorry. I'm gonna go on with the next question, and we'll hopefully your connection will get better. No, Kevin, sorry. Okay. Is this where we're supposed to make a joke about live TV or something like that? Isn't that what they do? Kevin, good luck. I hope you can get, okay, there you are. You're looking better. I'm going to go on to the next question, and hopefully you'll be able to be clearly understood in just a moment. Okay, I'm going to ask if each of you, Reverend and Rabbi, if you could each speak about how the needs of the community have changed during the pandemic and how you've had to adapt in order to remain accessible to your congregations and maintain a sense of communion. We'll go first to you, Rabbi.
Yeah, this is talk about a business or a model of a organization that gets disrupted by COVID. I think synagogues and churches have had to completely rethink how to build community and how to do programming. We have very little in-person programming at this point. I'll start out by saying that for the first few months, it was a drastic shift, especially when we hit the holiday season. So for example, in April, we had Passover and had to do virtual seders, which we had never done before. And they were like a giant Zoom call, and it was nice, and it was novel, and we loved it because we thought that there was something unique about it. But as we started to do Zoom services over and over again, we realized that it was just wearing thin on people. Eventually, we got back to doing outdoor services. We do Shabbat on the beach every summer, and we were able to do that. We did a drive-in Shabbat, a couple drive-in Shabbats over the summer. We had a couple of our high holiday services outside and on the beach. But we are very much back in a mode of non-gathering. Now, there's a lot of disappointment because we're doing the best we can, and quite often we feel like it's not as good as we used to be able to do it. So for example, you'll see behind me that there's a Hanukkah menorah that's lit. We did a virtual Hanukkah celebration with our community this evening, and we've been doing a virtual celebration each and every night. We had planned in October to be doing outdoor pop-up events where we can actually gather in person and masked and safely celebrate Hanukkah together. But with the current numbers out here in Suffolk County, that's simply not realistic. It's not safe to be able to do that. I would say that we're making the best of the situation that we have. We're still building community effectively, but there's a great deal of disappointment in that what we're doing isn't what we used to do. And there's a yearning to get back to be able to see people in person. And Zoom is a great stopgap until we get to that point. But we're really waiting for that point.
Yeah. Reverend, can you also speak to this?
Sure. Similarly, at St. Luke's, there was a great deal of sadness at having to close our building in March. And as we approached our Easter celebrations, during that time, we were just trying the technology, and it felt like every week we were getting a little bit better, a little bit better. And in July, our bishop gave us the approval to reopen our buildings. And so it was nice for there to be this great visual for the East Hampton community to see the people of St. Luke's gathered on the front lawn on Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock, and people who were on their way to the beach, people who were running by, people walking their pets would see the people of God gathered together, celebrating life, celebrating their faith, and practicing their faith in a very public way, which again is a testament to our resilience as people of faith, even despite having to be flexible and to make adjustments. And as we followed the positive cases out here, we've again had to make that painful decision to close our building. And so we will not be together in person for our Christmas celebrations. We will gather virtually on Christmas Eve for our customary 4:30 service. And it's going to be different. But it's the reality of where we are right now. And so we're in the season of Advent, which is about longing and eager expectation. And so we're looking forward. We thank God for all of the good news we've heard about the vaccines, and we're praying very fervently that in due time we will all be able to gather together in person. There's just really been this hunger for community, and there is nothing that replaces being able to hold and support and encourage one another in person in the way that we've done for generations.
Yeah, I think we'll all certainly have a renewed appreciation for that when we can resume. It's going to be very special. Kevin, how is your connection now?
Well, how do I look? Can you hear me now?
It's still breaking up, unfortunately.
Darn.
Oh, that was a little better. Do you want to give it a shot with the next question?
Yeah, sure. But if I could just say what I was trying to say before.
Yes.
I was just saying that I agree with the sentiment that Rabbi Franklin was talking about, with how the relationship of interconnectedness with religions is so unique to East Hampton. My history teacher always talks about how within East Hampton we live inside a bubble, and he's usually referring to our economic situation or with politics. But I feel like that sentiment is also shared again with religion, and it's something that should be celebrated, that people are able to be so together like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just say that this evening we had Father Constantine Lazarakis from the Greek Orthodox Church in Southampton join us to light the menorah. That's which is kind of ironic to some degree, because if you know the story of Hanukkah, it's about a group of Jews in the 2nd century BCE rising up against the Greeks who were oppressing them. And it was a battle between the Jews and the Greeks. And now we're actually celebrating the fact that we can come together and have a prayer from the Greek Orthodox priest right before our menorah celebration. And I think that is special. And it is, you're right, something that in the Hamptons we do have that many other places do not.
Okay. So that's perfect. Finally, as we wrap up, what are some wishes that you have for the community and for our country this holiday season and for the approaching New Year? And Reverend Lambert?
So light features prominently at this time of year. For Rabbi Franklin, he can certainly speak better to it than I could within the Jewish tradition. But as Christians, we look forward to this season of Christmas where we welcome the incarnate Word of God becoming flesh. And one of the things that Scripture tells us is that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness is not able to overcome it. So there's this place for light and for darkness. And so we're looking forward to that time of renewed life. We're looking forward to the brightness that's going to come on the other side of this virus. And my wish for our community is that we continue to keep our eyes and our hearts open to live into what it means for us to be neighbor, to be attentive to the needs of our community, and to really make sure that we're doing our best to support, encourage, and love each other from a distance and safely, but no less to do our best to keep our community together.
Thank you. And I'm not sure how much time we have left, but Reverend Rabbi Franklin.
I'll go really quickly and just share words of a Hanukkah song that happens to be one of my favorite Hanukkah songs, and it builds on that theme of light. We've come to expel the darkness, and our hands are light and fire. Each one of us is a little light, but together we are one steadfast light. Turn away the darkness, get out coldness, turn away because the light is coming.
Amen. Amen. Thank you both for your time today. Thank you, Kevin, for being here with me. And thank you for all that you do for our town and our community. We wish everyone a very safe and happy holiday season, and what a beautiful way to end. We're all moving towards the light. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Take good care.
You too.
All right.